Watch this.
The Idaho legislature makes the law of the land here in Idaho. But across the state lines, well, there's a lot you can do you can't do here. But a new bill is trying to stop that when it comes to abortion by calling it human trafficking. Another hot topic at the State House? Transgender treatments. A lengthy debate today in a House committee with tons of community members coming out to debate both sides of the bill, which would outlaw medical treatment for transgender teenagers. There's also a behind-the-scenes battle which is heading to the House floor, why Democrats believe a small change could make a big difference for legislative oversight. Idaho's bill to outlaw medical treatment for transgender kids is now heading to the House floor after passing the House Judiciary and Rules Committee 14-3. But not before the bill went before the public. A packed House for that hearing on House Bill 71, which would add transgender treatments like puberty blockers, hormone therapy, and gender-affirming surgeries for minors. It would add those things to Idaho's already existing genital mutilation of a child law. We heard from Republican Representative Bruce Skog, who is sponsoring the bill, who split his time with Blaine Canzati of the Idaho Family Policy Center, who obviously helped draft this bill. And we heard from several doctors in the state and otherwise who spoke both in favor and against the bill. Those doctors in favor spoke about a child's confusion when it comes to their gender, about how their dysphoria can be treated with just straight therapy, no pun intended. And they spoke to the permanence, I should say, of puberty blockers and hormone treatments, which I would assume is kind of the point of taking them, right? Those doctors opposed to the bill, well, they stress the need for such treatments for trans kids to help with their mental health and eventually their physical health as a way to avoid self-harm. They also said that 99% of physicians in Idaho are there to provide the best care possible for their patients, and lawmakers should stay out of the decision that should be between parents and their child's medical doctors. It was a common take among those in favor of the bill that these treatments, the hormone and puberty blocking treatments, are irreversible and go against what Representative Skog called the fundamental right to procreate that would be taken away by these parents.
It's a massive cash grab. The FDA has finally admitted to some of the long-term effects that these practices can have on children. Puberty blockers have been known to lead to swelling of the brain and vision loss, loss of bone density and muscle mass, and even sterilization. Yes, they're sterilizing children and giving the false promise that it's just simply a pause on puberty and can be reversed. These are claims that have been proven false repeatedly.
I have transgender patients over the age of 18 who have been on cross-sex hormones for more than 2 years, and they discontinued those hormones for a period of time in order to regain fertility and have successful pregnancy, both male and female. And the evidence is quite clear that puberty blockers do not shut the door on fertility.
A majority of gender dysphoric patients carry mental health diagnosis. Many have been sexually abused. I can testify that medically altering their physical appearance is not the answer. As a doctor who has sworn to do no harm, it is my duty to warn you against gender treatments that fundamentally alter a child's healthy body. These therapies sterilize children and do not address their underlying trauma. It would be considered unethical to perform a gastric bypass surgery on a child with an eating disorder.
The fear of being fined, jailed, or of losing my medical license for providing the well-established, safe, and medically studied standard of care for my patients is highly concerning to me, and I have considered looking to other states and other areas to practice. I strongly recommend that you reject this bill and to protect Idaho's future physician workforce and the rights of parents to make medical decisions for their children.
That idea of kind of moving somewhere else, well, Dr. Schwer said she's heard the same sentiment from several other doctors, either already in Idaho or considering moving to Idaho. There was also passionate testimony today from people with actual skin in the game, parents of transgender teenagers and transgender teenagers themselves. Chris Hunting is a transgender person raising a transgender teenager. They grew up in Idaho and told the committee there were countless times they were made to feel not wanted or that they did not belong here.
I'm here today to ask you to please stop bringing things like this here. My kid doesn't need to feel the way I've felt here. My kid deserves to be here.
Let's stick to the bill. Let's just talk about this, doing the surgery on the kids.
Absolutely. As an Idaho resident and an Idaho parent, it is my right to have medical discussions with my kid's doctor about their health care. And I've seen many of you stand adamantly against the government getting in the way of parenting. Confused as to why you're here trying to pass it today. Transgender youth belong here just as much as cisgender youth do. They need to know that. They need to know that they're loved, and passing legislation like this makes them know that there's a whole committee of you that think they're not.
This bill is nothing more than an attack on the most vulnerable of our kids, our transgender kids. This culture war has no place in the Idaho legislature.
Okay, let's stick to the bill, right?
This is part of the bill. House Bill 71 has one purpose only, and that is to prevent kids from getting life-saving medical care. I am sticking to the bill.
Okay, we are out of time for you too, so.
Well, let me just ask you this one thing, please.
We'll let
I
you wrap
implore
it
you
up.
as a mother, leave our kids alone. Let those decisions be with their parents and their doctors, not this body of people and not the Idaho
I
legislature.
appreciate your passion.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So you can kind of sense the theme there and the passion as well. Opponents wanting these decisions to remain with the family and their doctors. Okay, so what about an actual transgender teenager? Well, when 17-year-old Eve Devitt stepped to the podium to explain how being on estrogen for almost 3 years has saved her life, making her more complete, Representative Chris Mathias wanted her to walk him through the process.
It took probably about 9 months to a year after that to actually get on puberty blockers, because I had to go through a bunch of different psychological evaluations and stuff like that to make sure that it wasn't, that me being trans wasn't because of a traumatic experience or depression or anything else like that. And then from there, it took probably another 6 months of getting tests done, getting labs done, going to therapists, all that stuff, endocrinologists, to get onto estrogen. I am sick and tired of seeing the people on this committee constantly try to take away my rights every single year, but I'm not tired of fighting back. If you care about the rights for parents to choose what is right for their kids, like you stated you had just earlier today, then you will vote against this bill.
Eve says she's going to get a consultation for surgery, which will still not happen for at least another year. Point is, this isn't the very next step for teenagers who come out as transgender. In fact, a lot spend years in therapies, you just heard, before making any life or gender-changing decisions, and some don't even make that decision. Representative Julianne Young said at the end of the hearing today, the state of Idaho does set some limits on parental rights. That's what Idaho does, setting some limits on parental rights. Unless, of course, it comes to those parents in the name of religion who do not want to give their kids medical care. With this whole thing, they're not even sure how many Idahoans are going through gender affirmation treatment because we don't track this stuff in this state. We do know experts put the number of those with regrets who go through this at less than 1%. So they don't know how many they might help with this bill should it pass, but based on testimony today, they do know how many it would hurt. We're taking a different look at a different side of legislative debate, this time for oversight, why the Democrats think this small change is going to make a big difference. Well, now is a good time to send us your questions, your comments, and even your clever complaints. Just text them to us. The number is on your screen, 208-321-5614. Don't forget your name and the hashtag, the 208. Oh, and don't forget, stick around, because we could share yours at the end of the show. As you probably can imagine, there's a lot of behind-the-scenes work at the Idaho State House that we don't really talk about much. Some of that is procedural, sure, but it's really not that exciting. But sometimes those little-known processes can create a major debate. We're tracking one of those as we speak. It's a battle over who directs and oversees the Office of Performance Evaluation. I'm sure many of you are asking right now, what exactly is the Office of Performance Evaluation? Well, there's supposed to be a nonpartisan, independent office of the legislature that evaluates whether state government programs and the agencies involved with them are operating efficiently, cost-effectively, and are achieving the intended results. There's a proposal at the State House that would change who oversees that. Some say it's a basic move with no impact. Others warn it could have crucial consequences. Here's Joe Paris.
A behind-the-scenes battle is now heading to the full Idaho House for debate. The question: should the Office of Performance Evaluation see its oversight shifted to a new committee?
I would say it's the most important thing happening that you don't know anything about right now.
House Minority Leader, Democrat Representative Alana Rubel, says oversight of the Office of Performance Evaluation should remain with the bipartisan Joint Legislative Oversight Committee, which has 4 Democrats and 4 Republicans on it. But a proposal would see that shift to the Legislative Council, a committee of 8 Republicans and 6 Democrats.
So it would end basically one of the only places we still have in Idaho government where we have neutral bipartisan oversight.
The Office of Performance Evaluations, or OPE, is a long-standing establishment that is meant to evaluate whether state government programs and agencies are operating efficiently and cost-effectively and are also achieving their intended results. Rubel fears that will change if it moves to a partisan committee.
Right now we have an organization where everybody believes what they say because it's totally neutral and bipartisan. If it were put under the control of Republican leadership, there'd be a loss of credibility, but there'd be a very big difference in the mission. I think it would, what they do all of a sudden would be aligning with the desires of those in control, which is very different from how it works now.
Rubel, a member of the Joint Legislative Oversight Committee, says the group gets to submit for 3 or 4 reports on agencies and programs a year that are real deep dives. She believes if oversight changes, that will change as well, turning to a more basic audit on programs. However, Republicans disagree.
A lot of people are concerned that those OPE reports aren't going to come out anymore. That is not facts at all.
House Majority Leader, Republican Representative Megan Blanksma, says the idea about moving oversight from the Joint Legislative Oversight Committee to the Legislative Council is simple.
What you have to look at is JLOC is a fully appointed committee. So those people are not chosen by their peers to represent the thoughts and feelings of the legislature and to determine what agencies need to be reviewed. Okay? They're appointed. In this other manner, Legislative Council, all of the people that are on Legislative Council have been elected in one way or another by their peers and are presumably, you know, when you run an election, you're going to vote for somebody who you think you can relate to and that will be representative of you. So presumably, Leg Council is representative of the legislators and would do the review in a process that would represent them.
She adds that she believes work by OPE really won't change in reality.
OPE's job is literally in statute. That's what they are supposed to do and how they're supposed to do is in statute. So it doesn't really matter what directives come out of whatever council or committee that is giving the directive as far as partisanship. They still have a system that they have to follow. And so this whole idea that all of a sudden the Republicans are going to take something over and destroy it, A, I find it offensive because we're not out to destroy regardless of some people's opinion. And B, this is a much more representative way of picking agency reviews.
Blanksma wants to see OPE assignments also return towards its more intended purpose.
JLOC for the last couple of years has been approving projects as submitted that aren't necessarily in line with what code says OPE is supposed to do, right? It's the Office of Performance Evaluations. It's supposed to evaluate agencies, not, I would like to know more about sea otters, okay? That's not their job. And while I appreciate that some of the study work that they've done has been useful to people, they're supposed to be reviewing agencies.
We would never be having a discussion about fixing our school facilities, about what we need to pay educators and classified personnel in schools. None of those studies would be in existence if this bill had gone through previously. Now, thankfully, we have the benefit of those past studies, but I want a future where we have more studies that tell us, you know, real, reliable information that's overseen in a bipartisan way that gives decision makers the information they need to do a good job.
The actual bill gets rid of JLOC and assigns OPE to a different committee. That's all it does. It doesn't, it doesn't control the conditions of how OPE reports.
Nobody will see what's below the iceberg, so their mission will fundamentally alter, but also the people overseeing the mission will become very partisan. It will be the Republican leadership in control of the building will now be in control of the checks and balances on themselves. And they will be in control of any investigation of their work or investigation of their bills or investigation of their agencies.
The structure of OPE is in code. They have certain responsibilities. And unless we change those code responsibilities, it still has the same function. It's just determined by Leg Council, which is elected by the members of the legislature rather than an appointed group.
So to be clear for you at home, the process right now, there's actually a bill, a piece of legislation that would amend the way the OPE situation works right now. That bill did pass out of committee just this afternoon and is now headed to the full Idaho House. Brian, this is one of those conversations where it can be, really nuanced and it can be very complicated. And frankly, I'm sure many of our viewers may have never even heard of OPE before. But it's one of those behind-the-scenes things that happens at the State House that could have a big impact depending on who you ask. So here on the 208, we like to dive into some of those behind-the-scenes things as well as the big headlines items.
All right, we'll watch it move through. Thank you very much, Joe. I think Idaho lawmakers have a pretty simple job. Propose laws and regulations that govern the people within the state of Idaho's borders, right? Outside Idaho's borders, though, our state laws, well, they don't really hold any weight, as you well know. That's why once Idaho outlawed most abortions, Idahoans started looking for that procedure outside and wanted to simply drive to another state if they wanted to have one. It could be Oregon or it could be Washington. But this could be illegal, specifically for minors. Republican Representative Barbara Ehart from Idaho Falls introduced House Bill 98 today in the state, in committee today. This bill would consider any adult transporting a minor outside the state of Idaho for an abortion to be, quote, a human trafficker. Exceptions exist for parents, legal guardians, or parental consent, but abortion accessibility advocates still say this is problematic and it isolates a very specific group of kids in need. Here's Andrew Bartline.
Since the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, there's been a different kind of work in the Gem State for Planned Parenthood.
We have been here helping answer questions for patients, helping them navigate now safe pathways to abortion care outside of the state of Idaho.
That's because Idaho law bans most abortions at any stage of pregnancy. Abortions are only legal in the state of Idaho in the case of rape, incest, or to save the mother's life at the doctor's discretion.
You know, at the end of the day, when we say care no matter what, that's exactly what we mean.
What it means exactly is crossing state lines. According to Planned Parenthood's website, the nearest legal abortion provider for people in Boise is 4 hours away in Walla Walla, Washington, or a 5.5-hour drive to Bend, Oregon. And this isn't hypothetical.
Yes, they have been leaving Idaho to get abortion care.
But some of these, too, could soon be illegal.
A connection to abortion and human trafficking.
Behind Republican Representative Barbara Ehart, who introduced House Bill 98.
Having to do with the human trafficking by adding definitions to the illegal trafficking of minors to procure a criminal abortion.
Under this bill, anyone transporting a minor out of state for an abortion is considered a human trafficker, a crime punishable by 2 to 5 years. Exceptions exist for parents transporting their own kids, or if the parent offers their consent to another adult.
Extreme lawmakers in Idaho are in a race to the bottom. Is the next step here surveillance? Are they going to start surveilling Idahoans in terms of what we are doing when we cross state borders?
The bill received no questions in the committee introduction.
The motion is carried. It will be done.
As a result, the 208 reached out to Representative Ehart to clarify portions of her bill. This includes civil enforcement. The first portion of the bill suggests parental consent is a legal criminal defense against a trafficking charge. However, later in the bill, it seems parental consent is not a legal civil defense, meaning the family could still be sued for $20,000 for having an abortion out of state. Representative Ehart did not answer or offer any more clarity.
Most young people do involve their parents in a decision like this. We are talking about young people who are in extreme circumstances who cannot involve their parents. And so to put criminal sanctions in place, to criminalize and punish not only the person seeking access to healthcare, but also those who are trying to help them, is not going to solve these issues.
There are several questions we still have regarding this bill. Representative Ehart is in 3 different committees. There's also a House floor session today as well. So notably, the State Affairs Committee had that featured testimony in Scogg's bill that took a long time. So, Brian, understandably, Representative Ehart's busy. We could not get in touch with her today, tried multiple times, but several questions that we've been looking into about this. You know, if you go outside these state boundaries and you have this procedure, is this a criminal or a civil defense, excuse me. That was one of the several pieces we talked about trying to figure out.
Right. I mean, there are no laws right now that say you can't go to Oregon and smoke some marijuana and then come back to Idaho. There's no laws about that, but they're looking to kind of, this is not, I don't want to say it's equal. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying the premise is kind of the same. You want to legislate what goes on outside of Idaho's borders.
Yeah, and there's several things in this bill, specific language, trying to sift through. We're going to stay on top of it, continue to sift through it, and hopefully get in touch with Representative Ehart at some point and iron that out.
Just introduced without any sort of discussion, so yeah, we'll still hopefully get some questions answered. Thank you very much, Andrew. All right, busy day on the text machine. Let's get right to them, like this one from Barry and Emmett. If OPE's function is in code, then it does not matter who they report to. Why don't they just leave it alone? Good question. Some folks, same folks who want parents to have full say in education and are unqualified in education, want full say in medical care for other people's children and are equally unqualified in medicine. Yep. Here we have Idaho, says Lynn in Meridian. Government overreach at its finest. They came for the women, now for parents and kids. When for men? Oh, wait, never mind, says Jen in Boise. Why should the government stay out of transgender children's medical discussions and yet be involved in vaccination choices? Says, or is a question Matt asks in Boise. Our legislature is strongly influenced by people and organizations not from Idaho. Apparently, they are unable to think for themselves, says Kurt. And that's true. A lot of these bills that are coming through these days, well, they're basically cookie cutter bills that are developed by outside organizations, and they've worked in other states, and then they're just passed right along to some of our legislators in Idaho. With regards to the percentages they use for transgender debate, you can find percentages that support and dispute both sides. What's not disputed is when the front cortex of the brain of our youth develop, we are letting them make life-altering decisions without fully understanding development or maturity to make that decision, although they're not making that decision by themselves. Parents, doctors are all involved, and again, it's a process. It's not something that happens overnight, the next day. It takes months and sometimes years. I stopped watching the 208 because it is very liberal leaning, and it makes me very angry that people move here and try to change the great state and laws we have in Idaho. I guess I can say thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.